What if the town you rode into was already waiting to judge you before you even stepped off the stage? What if the man you came to work for carried a silence so heavy it could crush your future before it even began? The stagecoach groaned to a stop in a cloud of dust at the edge of Dustwell, Wyoming. The autumn of 1878 had not been kind to the land. The riverbeds were cracked, the prairie the color of old bone, and the sky hung low and gray like a lid pressed down on the whole valley. Mave stepped down from the coach with her satchel clutched to her chest. Dust coated her boots, her hem, even the inside of her throat. Inside her worn bag lay everything she had: her father's iron tools, a small canvas roll of medical instruments, and a letter offering her work at Boone Creek Ranch. The letter had carried hope. The town in front of her carried something colder. She scanned the quiet street. A man stood near the hitching post, tall and still as a fence post driven deep into dry ground. His hat shaded most of his face, but his jaw was sharp, his shoulders broad, and the weight he carried felt older than his 33 years. This had to be Elias Boone. Their eyes met for one breath before a scream cut through the dusty air. A woman's scream, tearing, panicked, from the saloon. Mave didn't think. She only moved. People on the boardwalk turned, but none stepped forward. Mave pushed through the swinging saloon doors and into a storm of chaos. Men stood frozen. A mother clutched a small boy whose face was turning blue. His little chest strained for breath, making a terrible rasping sound that seemed to shake the air itself. "He's choking," someone shouted. "Hit his back," another yelled. Mave pushed through the circle of useless advice. "He's not choking," she said firmly. "His throat is closing. It's croup. I need steam. Now." Her voice cut through the noise. The bartender stared at her like he wasn't sure she was real. "That kettle," she said, pointing at the stove. "Bring it." He moved. "Blanket. Thick one." Someone ran to fetch it. She draped the blanket over the child and mother, then lifted the steaming kettle and slid the spout under the edge. It made a warm tent around them, thin white vapor drifting out like hope itself. "Breathe with him," she told the trembling mother. "Slow. Easy." The saloon fell into a hush. Only the kettle hissed. Only the boy's awful rasp filled the space. Minute by minute the sound began to change. A harsh cough broke through. Another. Then a wail. Loud. Furious. Alive. The mother sobbed with relief, hugging her son close. Mave pulled the blanket aside, checking the boy's color. Pink was returning. He was safe. A murmur rose in the saloon. Respect. Surprise. Something close to gratitude. Then a single cold voice sliced through it. "Well, what a vigorous display." Mave turned. A woman stood in the doorway, dressed in silk and judgment. Ruth Caraway, wife of the richest man in town. Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "It seems Mr. Boone's new help is practical," she said, letting her gaze sweep over Mave's broad shoulders and travel-stained clothes. Behind her lounged Deputy Sloan. His badge was dusty, his eyes unpleasant, and the slow smirk on his face crawled under Mave's skin. Elias Boone had entered silently. He stood near the back, unreadable as stone, soaking in Ruth's poison without a twitch. His silence carried weight, like a man used to swallowing whole storms. Mave rose to her feet and met Ruth's gaze. "Breathing is a talent I like to keep children doing," she said simply. A flicker of annoyance crossed Ruth's perfect face. Outside, Mave followed Elias to his wagon. He handed her the contract. Plain words offering her $40 a month, room, board, and work managing his ranch. Some in town had expected a different kind of contract. A bride. "I'm here to manage a ranch, not a husband," Mave said as she signed. "That might disappoint people." A faint glint touched Elias's eyes. "It will." They rode in silence across the brittle prairie. The Boone Creek Ranch came into view as the sun dropped behind the mountains. A house of stone and timber. A barn. Corrals. No curtains. No flowers. No warmth. A place built for surviving, not living. Elias pointed toward the lean-to beside the kitchen. "I sleep there," he said. "Your room's upstairs." It was not personal. It was a wall. A boundary he kept around his life like barbed wire. The days that followed settled into hard work and long hours. Mave cleaned the ranch ledgers that looked like they had been neglected since grief first hollowed Elias out. She learned to mend, harness, brand calves, and brace herself against the force of a 1,000-pound animal. She earned the respect of Jed Crow and Ben the ranch hand, not with talk, but with sweat and grit. And every night the knocking came. A slow, rhythmic thump from the old dry well near the house, always after dark, always steady. A sound that felt wrong in the empty silence of the Wyoming night. One morning during a supply run to town, Ruth Carraway and Deputy Sloan cornered Mave in the general store. Their words dripped with insult. Their disdain was open. Sloan's gaze crawled across her like an unwelcome touch. She refused to bend. "I'm here for sacks of flour," Mave said loudly, "not anyone's husband." A farmer snorted. The store fell silent. Sloan's eyes darkened with spite. But trouble had already begun. On her way home, Mave found the irrigation stakes on Boone Creek snapped in half. Boot prints from a heavy man, too clean to be ranch work, were stamped into the damp earth near the ditch. A warning, a theft, a beginning. And that night, the knocking from the old well grew louder, deeper, like something beneath the earth had woken up. What if the truth hid underground, beating like a secret heart beneath your feet? What if stepping toward it meant stepping into danger you could never unsee? The knocking from the old well wouldn't leave Mave's mind. It followed her through every chore, every hour spent fixing the ranch's broken books, every moment Elias watched her from a quiet distance like a man trying to decide if he could trust the sun after too long in the dark. 3 nights after her discovery of the broken irrigation stakes, the knocking came again, louder, more steady, a sound that did not belong in a dry well. Mave grabbed a lantern and stepped into the cold Wyoming night. The ranch slept behind her. The wind was still. Even the cattle were quiet. She knelt beside the old stone well. Her fingers brushed the heavy wooden cap. That was when she felt it. An iron ring hidden under the rim, almost invisible. She fetched a crowbar. With a grunt, she pried the cap just enough to slip inside. The well was dry. But the smell rising from it was wet. Wrong. Mave climbed down the old ladder, lantern dangling from her hand. At the bottom she found a wooden floor. New wood. A false bottom. Beneath her boots, something thumped in a steady rhythm. She found the trapdoor by touch. Below it was a cramped tunnel leading deep under the ranch, just tall enough for a man to crouch through. Damp clay lined the walls, thick and dark. Water trickled along a carved channel in the floor. And that same clay was the very same she had seen dried on Deputy Sloan's boots. Her breath caught. She backed out, climbed up, and lowered the heavy well cap. With the proof stuck to the soles of her boots, she went straight to Elias's lean-to. He looked up from mending a bridle as she told him everything, every detail. When she finished, he sat still for a long moment. Then he said in a voice that wasn't cold, it was hollow, "Leave it be, Mave." "I can't," she said. "I fought once," he whispered. "I lost everything." He looked away. "Leave it be." 2 days later, Dustwell called a public meeting about new water allocations, a fancy way of saying the Carraways were taking more. The town hall was packed. Silas Carraway stood at the front with the confidence of a man who owned land, money, and most of the law. His wife Ruth moved through the crowd like a minister gathering believers. Deputy Sloan stood by the door with his hand on his pistol and a smirk on his lips. Silas spoke of progress. Ruth spoke of hard choices. Sloan spoke of the law. They never said Elias's name, but every pointed word stabbed in his direction. Elias stayed silent, jaw tight, shoulders rigid. Mave's chest tightened. So she stood, every eye turned toward her. "I'm new here," she said, steady and calm. "I don't know a lot about water law, but I know water." The crowd listened, even Ruth. Mave told them about the little boy she had saved in the saloon, how water used right saved his life, how water kept from those who needed it could ruin a whole valley. Her voice did not accuse, it revealed. And that was worse for the Caraways. Whispers spread, people shifted, doubts took root. On the wagon ride home, Elias stared at the reins. "You shouldn't have stood up," he said. "You made yourself a target." "You already were," she said softly. "Now you're not alone." For the first time, he turned his full gaze on her. There was pain there, and gratitude. He pulled the wagon over by the dying creek, and the truth finally came out. The real story of his wife Hannah and the baby born too early. The flash flood, the blocked pass. The night he held her hand as she slipped away. "It wasn't a fever," he whispered. "I couldn't save her. And I promised her I would." It broke Mave's heart, not because he cried, but because he didn't. He had no tears left, only guilt carved into bone. In the days after, something softened between them. Mave found an old side saddle in the barn, a saddle that had belonged to Hannah. With quiet hands, she restored it, hours each night, stitch by stitch, oil by oil. When she placed it on Lark, her favorite mare, it looked almost new. Elias saw it and went still. He touched the leather like it was a memory he wasn't brave enough to face. "Thank you," he said, voice low, "for giving an old thing new life." It was the first time he had looked at her without that wall in his eyes. The next day brought hard work. They repaired their portion of the irrigation ditch. They shoveled until their muscles screamed. They moved like a team with a rhythm that felt older than their short time together. By the time sunset came, Mave was caked in dust and mud from shoulders to boots. A hot bath was the only dream keeping her upright. Steam curled from under the small bathhouse door. Relief washed over her. She stepped inside. Elias was in the tub. He hadn't heard her. His back was turned, his hair slicked back, shoulders broad, jaw tight from the day's strain. "The pump handle broke," he said, not turning. "I was just washing off." Mave's face heated. She stepped back. "I'll wait." "No," he said, finally turning his head. "There's enough water." It was more than an offer. It was trust. She stepped toward the spare basin at the corner of the tub. Her boots were slick with mud. The floor was wet. She reached for the dipper, and her foot slid. She fell forward with a gasp. Elias reached for her instinctively. His fingers closed around her wrist, but her momentum carried them both, and she crashed straight into the tub with him, sending a wave of warm water over the edge. She slipped right into his bath. The cowboy caught more than just her hand. For a long, stunned second, they stared at each other. Water dripping, her skirts floating like drowned sails, his arm braced behind her. Then she laughed. It burst out of her in a helpless rush. Elias blinked. Then a slow, warm chuckle rumbled from his chest. Their laughter filled the tiny room, rolling through the steam until something unspoken settled between them like a breath held too long. When the laughter faded, he reached for a towel and gently wiped a smear of mud from her cheek. His fingers trembled. So did hers. They cleaned up in quiet, warm silence, drying off by the kitchen stove while their clothes hung nearby. Then Elias surprised her again. He brought out 2 keys, one to the gun cabinet, one to his strongbox. The strongbox held the deed to the ranch, the water rights, the maps, everything that mattered. He set the keys in her hands. "So we're partners in everything," he said. Her breath caught. The weight of those keys felt like the weight of trust itself. They made a plan that night. Not to talk, not to argue, to gather proof, to expose the tunnel, to measure the stolen water, to take their case to someone who would listen. They waited for the new moon. Then, in the dead of night, lanterns in hand, they pried open the well cap and descended into the dark. The hidden tunnel stretched out before them, damp and narrow. A thin stream of stolen water flowed along the floor. They followed it, step by cautious step. Soon the tunnel opened into a small chamber. A cast-iron pump stood there, pumping water out of Boone Creek and down toward the Caraway property. A thick rubber hose carried the stolen flow. A leather-bound ledger sat beside it. Sloane's handwriting filled the pages. Dates, times, gallons, his signature at the bottom of every entry. "This is it," Mave whispered. "This is the proof." Elias reached for the book. That was when they heard it. Footsteps, voices, getting closer. Elias snatched the lantern and blew it out. Darkness swallowed them whole. Deputy Sloane ducked into the chamber with 2 hired men. His lantern lit their faces. His voice was smug. "Caraway wants the new alfalfa field flooded by morning. Let's get it done." Then he froze. 3 sets of fresh footprints crossed the mud. His eyes narrowed. "Hold it," he growled. "We got company." Before he could reach for his gun, Elias burst from the shadows, slamming into one of the men. The lantern smashed. Darkness took over. Chaos exploded. Mave felt for anything she could use. Her hands closed around the long pump handle. She looked up. A support beam wedged into place held the ceiling steady. She jammed the iron handle under it and pushed. Hard. The beam shifted, cracked, and the ceiling gave way. A rush of water burst down from above, flooding the chamber in icy torrents. Sloane screamed. The men stumbled. Elias grabbed Mave's arm. "I got him," he shouted. "And the book. Go!" They dragged an unconscious Sloane through the rising floodwater, fighting up the tunnel, climbing the well ladder, and hauling him over the edge just before the chamber drowned. They had escaped with their lives. And the proof. But Dustwell was about to see its darkest hour. What if standing up for the truth cost you everything? Your safety, your home, even the land you called your own? What if the only way forward was through a storm meant to break you? The proof they carried should have been enough. The muddy ledger, the stolen water, the secret tunnel. Elias and Mave rode to the county seat in Buffalo with Sloane tied up in their barn and hope fighting against fear in their chests. Judge Patterson listened. He nodded. He looked at the maps, he held the ledger, and then he dismissed everything with a slow shake of his head. "A hand-drawn map and a book found in a hole," he said. "Nothing more than claims. The Caraways are respected people. This is insufficient." Silas Caraway stood behind him, calm and smug. Ruth's face was composed, cold as a winter sky. Deputy Sloane smirked from his seat, knowing he would walk free. Mave felt the weight of the judge's lie settle over the room like a dark, suffocating cloth. He didn't need evidence. He had been bought long before they ever stepped inside. When they left the courthouse, Ruth Caraway's voice floated after them. "She doesn't belong here," she said, loud enough for the whole boardwalk to hear. "Stirring trouble. Destroying good men with her wild stories." Mave didn't cry, but a part of her heart cracked. The next morning, a new sheriff from Buffalo arrived, not with justice, but with cruel news, a foreclosure notice. An old loan of Elias's father, held quietly by Silas Caraway, was being called in. They had 30 days before Boone Creek Ranch went to auction. That night, Elias stood at the window hollow-eyed. "It's over," he whispered. "We can't beat them." Mave stepped forward, her voice steady even as her soul shook. "You're right," she said. He turned, stunned by her agreement. "We can't beat the machine," she said softly. "So we take it apart, piece by piece." But the land itself seemed to turn on them before they could act. 5 days later, the sky turned a sick, bruised yellow. Jed Crow, recovered enough to stand with help, squinted toward the horizon. "Hail," he muttered, big as fists. It struck without mercy. Hailstones slammed into the barn roof like thrown stones, ripping shingles loose and pocking the ground. Horses screamed in terror. The noise was deafening, like 1,000 hammers trying to break the world open. Mave saw the horses panicking in the corral. "They'll die out there," she cried. She and Elias ran into the storm with blankets over their heads, shielding their skulls from the crushing hail. They pushed the terrified animals toward the dry gully. One by one, the horses stumbled through, guided by Mave's steady hand and Elias's shout. They were so close to saving them all when a crack of white lightning split the sky. It hit the barn, The old timber burst into flames instantly. Smoke rolled from the loft. Fire raced upward, hungry and fast. "My stallion!" Elias shouted. "Comet's inside!" He broke from the corral, sprinting straight toward the burning barn. "Elias, no!" Mave screamed, but he didn't stop. He was running toward his last hope of saving his herd, running toward death itself. That's when she heard it. Another sound. A sharper, deadlier crack. A rifle shot. Deputy Sloan stood near the fence line, rifle raised, aiming into the chaos. He waited for Elias to appear in the smoky doorway. Jed saw him first. And he ran. The old rancher threw himself forward, right into the line of fire, taking the bullet meant for Elias. He staggered, clutched his side, and collapsed into the mud. Sloan cursed, lowering the rifle. With the storm hiding him, he ducked away, disappearing into the hail. Then Elias stumbled out of the burning barn, dragging Comet by the halter, coughing and shaking, soot covering his face. He saw Jed on the ground. Something broke inside him. Mave reached Jed and dropped to her knees. Blood poured from his side in thick red pulses. A major artery was hit. "Elias!" she yelled. "Pressure! A stick! Anything! Go!" The command snapped him out of shock. He ran for a towel. Mave pressed her hands on the wound, searching the mud for something. Anything. She found a broken piece of fence rail. She used it as a windlass, twisting the cloth tight until the bleeding slowed. Jed groaned. His breath came thin and fast. Elias knelt in the mud, staring at his oldest friend with hollow eyes. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't lose anyone else. Not again." Quote. Mave grabbed his shirt with both hands and shook him. "You look at me," she growled. "He is not dead. We are not beaten. You do not get to give up. You hear me?" He met her eyes. Something steadied, something hardened, something lived. The rain finally drowned the fire. Neighbors arrived, ranchers from all across the valley. They took one look at the muddy boot prints Sloan left behind, prints filled with the same dark clay from the secret tunnel, and the truth hit them harder than the hail ever could. A man they respected had been shot by the law they trusted. For a neighbor they had doubted. Everything changed. 2 weeks later, Dustwell gathered for the harvest festival. Children ran between tables. Women sold pies. Men leaned against fence rails and talked of rain, markets, and the fight they had nearly lost. At the center of the festival stood a strange wooden stall built by Elias and Mave. On a long table, a clay-lined trough represented Boone Creek. A tiny hand pump sat beside it. A canvas map showed water rights in bright red stakes. People gathered, curious. Mave stood on a crate, calm and steady. "This is our water," she said, pointing to the trough. "And this is what was hiding under Boone Creek." A little boy was asked to pump the handle. Water slowly drained from the trough. It poured into a bucket hidden under the table. The creek dried up. The crowd gasped. Silas Carraway shoved his way forward, furious. "That proves nothing," he shouted. "It's a trick." Mave lifted a leather-bound ledger. "Then explain this," she said. "Your private book of payments to Judge Patterson and bonuses to Deputy Sloan." Silas went pale. Sloan went stiff. And from behind the crowd, a calm voice spoke. "That's enough." The new sheriff from Buffalo stepped forward. Behind him came another man in a fine coat, a federal inspector. "In the name of the governor," the inspector announced, "Judge Patterson's ruling is suspended. All water rights are restored until full investigation is complete." Silas tried to flee. He tripped climbing onto his wagon. A canvas tarp tore loose, and there beneath it, in full view of Dustwell, was the thick black hose still caked with the same dark clay from the secret tunnel. Silas Carraway was handcuffed on the spot. Deputy Sloan, too. The machine had finally been exposed, not by courts, by the people. What came after was slow healing. Dustwell wasn't perfect, but neighbors showed up with lumber to rebuild the barn. The doctor from Buffalo offered to teach Mave midwifery. Jed recovered. Martha Crow wept in Mave's arms when he took his first steps. Even Ruth Carraway came one night, trembling, veiled, carrying a ledger with every bribe her husband had ever made. She gave it to Mave in silence. The town healed, because truth was no longer buried in a tunnel. One evening, as the sun dropped over the valley, Elias found Mave by the new flowing creek. The water whispered over the stones like a song of second chances. He stood beside her. No walls, no silence, only a man who had finally let go of guilt. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. Simple, hammered metal, shaped from an old railroad spike. "Old things," he said softly, "can be made new if the right hands hold them." His voice shook. "Mave, if you'll have me, let's plant cottonwoods here. A row for the life we'll build, a future we'll grow together." Her breath caught. Tears blurred the creek. "Yes," she whispered. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit like it had been waiting for her all along. They walked back to the house, hand in hand. By the wooden trough, Mave slipped on a patch of damp earth. Elias caught her instantly, her hand, her waist, her smile. He held her close, his forehead resting gently against hers. "Seems you're good at that," she whispered. His eyes warmed. "This time," he said softly, "and every time. I always catch more than just your hand." He kissed her as the creek flowed full and strong behind them, washing hope back into the valley.